Creative babble.
Hello?
Like a dream.
The MGM Plus hit series From returns with a brand new season.
My family is trapped in a terrifying place.
From executive producers of Lost.
This place will not break us.
Nothing that I've been through is possible.
Why can't they leave us alone?
The only way we go home is together.
From new season. Watch now only on MGM Plus.
I wonder why they're trying to make me out to be the super villain. I don't know. I don't like this.
But do you like this, LaDonna? Part of me thinks that you are relishing in all this drama, and that makes me sick. You know, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of this podcast investigation or the daily barrage from Reddit. Sometimes I actually feel sorry for you. But then I remember all the crazy things you're accused of.
I'm now being accused of stealing evidence from the Fort Smith Police Department. None of this is true. I mean, I didn't steal anything for them or they wouldn't be working with me. I didn't serve 10 days for slander. It was contempt of court, biatch. And the nonprofit status was revoked briefly because we forgot to file a 990, and once I filed it and realized we were supposed to, they reinstated it. It was nothing nefarious.
During the course of this podcast, you've heard some really messed up things. This series is like a car wreck that you just can't look away.
I'm dying because, some of the shit I just made up on the fly just because I knew that they were watching, so that makes me super happy. Ha ha ha, fuckers.
Throughout the series, LaDonna's accusers have provided me with a treasure trove of voice memos.
I'm trying to figure out why he said that about not seeing many photos of me, because we both know that's bullshit. He is Googling me as fast as he is wanking off to Death Fetish.
You've been able to listen to LaDonna Humphrey herself, in her own voice, describing the mind games and the tactics she uses to manipulate people.
This is so serious what I'm about to say that I have to actually make a voice message instead of typing it. If she fucks around with us, she's gonna find out. It's okay then. I can keep fucking around with this guy. I'm just trying to piss him off. He's not gonna talk to us. He's just playing games.
We've heard her belittle her enemies.
This is the work of Sandy Jones, a.k.a. Patty Rush.
Her constant craving for fame.
This is going to sound ridiculous and so diva-ish, and I hope you can forgive me in advance, but I've had multiple interview requests this weekend. I can't go anywhere anymore without people talking to me about the book or the Witt case. And anyway, as I was coming back out to my car, one of the teachers stopped me. And she said, I've been listening to your podcast. I listen to it when I go on my run. And I can't believe how crazy the world is. And you're so brave. I was like, thank you, thank you. She goes, can you come out to my car and sign my book? I'm like, sure.
But there came a point where you, the listener, went from being entertained to what the fuck is going on here? This is beyond grotesque. There are women right now living under LaDonna's roof crying out for help. I felt that turning point in the story. Did you? Many of you took actions. You sent letters to different government agencies. You made phone calls to influential people in your area. And you even started sleuthing, uncovering new leads. As a content creator, it's been moving, really. But I can't continue this series forever. At some point, it has to come to an end. Today, in the finale of Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, trademark, we're going to hear from an FBI profiler to see what she thinks of LaDonna's behavior. And we'll finally answer the question, after 16 episodes, will Javier be able to land this plane? Will it be a satisfying ending? Who are we kidding? This thing might not ever end. I'm Javier Leiva, and this is Pretend. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else. Imagine this. It's the 1920s. The air is thick with secrets. The fashion is sharp. And somewhere in the shadows, a mystery is waiting to be unraveled. Welcome to June's Journey, the game that turns you into a detective in the heart of the roaring 1920s. You're not just playing another game. You're stepping into the shoes of June Parker, a woman on a mission to solve the murder of her sister. Every detail matters, from the clues hidden in the elegant parlors of New York to the cobblestone streets of Paris. But this isn't just about finding objects. It's about piecing together a story filled with twists, turns, and enough intrigue to keep you on the edge of your seat. What sets June's Journey apart? It's the way that the game pulls you into another time. The stunning visuals, the immersive storylines, and the thrill of solving a mystery make it more than just a game. It's an experience. Plus, with every puzzle you solve, you get closer to uncovering the truth behind June's sister's murder. So, are you ready to escape into a world of glamour, danger, and mystery? Download June's Journey for free today on iOS and Android. Trust me, once you start, you will not stop until you crack the case.
Life is full of things to manage. Your work, your family, your plans, and your treatment. Consider Kesimpta, ofatumumab 20 milligram injection. You can take it yourself from the comfort of home. If you're ready for something different, ask your healthcare provider about Kesimpta and check out the details at kesimpta.com. Brought to you by Novartis Pharmaceuticals Corporation.
Sometimes when I read LaDonna's text messages or listen to her voice memos, I wonder, is she talking about herself?
That fat fucking freak should not be allowed to push you to a situation where you have to change your phone number.
In this message to Alicia Lockhart, LaDonna is psychoanalyzing the fetish porn director, Chris Corner, aka Fetish Master.
But he's just playing games. I don't understand him. I don't even think he understands himself. I think whatever personality or personalities in him that actually send the text messages, it means something to them, or maybe he gets a kick out of it, or maybe this is meth induced. But anyway, I wanted to say the words fat fucking freak and send it to you. So there you go.
I've learned a lot about LaDonna over the last few months, like the fact that she is deathly afraid of lemons. One squirt of this menacing citrus could cause her to flare up in hives, make it difficult to breathe, and could even result in GI issues such as vomiting or diarrhea. But Alicia says that sometimes she forgets about this allergy. In fact, Alicia says that she witnessed LaDonna devour a meal marinated in lemon, the devil's nectar. By the way, citrus allergies are real, but probably not something to freak out about. LaDonna also hates it when people spell her name with a lowercase d. It just drives her nuts.
It's capital fucking D.
But this is all petty stuff, right? We're not here to talk about white lies or mild allergies or even grammar. We're here to study the behavior of a woman accused of tormenting her victims under aliases to gain fame. A woman who will stop at nothing to get revenge against the people who have crossed her. The question is anybody safe from LaDonna Humphrey? If you ask her sister, the answer is no. LaDonna has behaved this way her entire life. But what about her friends? The publisher of Genius Books was one of the first to speak out in support of his friend LaDonna Humphrey. Here's a voice memo of LaDonna talking about Stephen Booth.
At the same time, it's hard to know how much of it means something and how much of it is just, delusional bullshit that he's pulled out of his fat fucking ass. I don't know. The guy has really just pissed me off.
He's a, male chauvinist. He's so misogynistic. It's ridiculous.
Here she is talking about her friend and nonprofit partner, Amy Smith.
She just wants to be able to tag along but not have to do any of the work. It's like she co-founded All the Lost Girls with me and does really nothing. Doesn't show up to the meetings on time, if she remembers the meetings.
This is how she talks about her friends, the people who are tarnishing their own reputation standing by her. And we've already heard from her pal David McClam, who admits that he receives multiple harassing messages. With friends like LaDonna Humphrey, who needs enemies, right? But what about her home life? What is it like for Danny Humphrey, LaDonna's husband?
I threw a lamp once across the house because I was mad at Danny when I found out he had a little girlfriend on the side. And believed the kind of wrath and hell, fire, and brimstone that I called down from the heavens when that happened. If I told you some of the shit I pulled during that time in my life, you might disown me. It was pretty bad. I made Danny write out detailed accounts of every interaction they ever had. Yes, I know that's insane, and yes, I know it's very petty, but I was quite insistent on it. And then I made him text all of his family members and tell them what he had done. I'm not proud of my behavior by any means, but I did lose my mind temporarily, and I just thought I would share that with you. I've not confessed that to many, so they were furious with him, and they demanded that he do whatever he had to do to make it right and to salvage the relationship. I wasn't rational during that time period at all. I was very irrational. I can see that now. But at the time, it seemed logical. I don't know. It just did. I know that's really bizarre. I did some other really strange things, too. One day, while everybody was gone, I had printed off pictures of her and cut them out and taped them over all of my photos in the house. I mean, I would consider burning the house down if he did it again. I don't think he will, though, because he realizes how much the whole thing hurt me. I was a wreck, and I was right in the middle of the lawsuit, so I found out all this just months before I had to spend that 10 days in jail. It sucked like a motherfucker.
Speaking of burning the house down, I've heard her use this expression multiple times.
I'm laughing not at you, because I was going to say something like, burn the house down, because you know how extra I am.
LaDonna accused her husband Danny of cheating on her with a woman at work. Now, it could be the same woman that LaDonna was ranting about earlier, or it could be a totally different woman. I'm not sure, but both women had the first same name. We got a hold of the woman in question, and she says that the affair never happened. The woman claims that her company's HR department received screenshots of messages sent to LaDonna from the alleged mistress's Facebook account. The woman says that she never sent out those messages. She was so upset by this whole ordeal that she even hired an attorney to request evidence from Facebook to prove that she never sent these messages. HR said that they were going to investigate and someone would lose their job over this. As a result, Danny Humphrey ended up quitting, and the woman claims that after this all happened, she started receiving multiple harassing and vulgar messages. Sounds familiar? Mind you, all of this is happening during the same time period when LaDonna Humphrey was sitting in court about to go to jail for contempt of court. I thought the whole idea behind throwing people in jail and prison is to punish someone for their behavior and to deter them from committing the same crime again. But if these allegations are true, it's clear LaDonna Humphrey did not learn her lesson. Maybe 5 days in jail wasn't enough to rehabilitate her. And that's what's so fascinating about this season, because despite the mounting evidence against her, LaDonna Humphrey doesn't retreat. In fact, she doubles and triples down. Most people would just hunker down and ride out the storm, but she fights back. Why? So I got to thinking, what would an expert in criminal psychology and behavior analysis have to say about people like LaDonna Humphrey? So I called an FBI profiler to see what she thinks about all this. My conversation with Julia Cowley, a retired FBI profiler, is after the break. After 16 episodes and dozens of bonus episodes, I finally wrapped up my series, Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey? But if you still have burning questions, this Tuesday, September 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Time, I will be hosting a live Q&A on YouTube with the people who call themselves the survivors of LaDonna Humphrey. There's going to be multiple guests that you can ask real-time questions live on YouTube. I'm going to be the moderator. It's going to be an hour long or however long we want to go. And it's going to be pretty awesome because even though we've talked about this case for multiple episodes, there are still lots of unanswered questions. So I'll see you Tuesday, September 24th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Time. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss it. Julia Cowley is a retired FBI profiler and a former special agent known for her work on several high-profile cases. She's most famous for her work investigating the Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo, the man responsible for approximately 45 rapes, 12 homicides, and multiple residential burglaries across California. So, Julia, I'm so excited about this because when I think of an FBI profiler, I think when everybody thinks about an FBI profiler, they're usually thinking about serial killers and violent crime. But I think it's so interesting to talk with you, an FBI profiler, about a crime like this where it doesn't involve violent crime. And I'm so curious about your take on this whole thing because I know that you've been listening, right?
I have. I think I'm up to date on all the episodes.
How cool is that? An FBI profiler listens to my show. But you might be asking, what the heck does an FBI profiler do? An FBI profiler is someone who analyzes crime scenes, detects offender behavior, and assists in solving complex crimes by developing profiles that aid law enforcement in hopes of identifying the criminal. Typically, when people think of FBI profilers, they're thinking serial killers, John Douglas, Mindhunter, Clarice Starling from Silence of the Lambs. But Julia tells me that her work was not limited to serial killers.
I worked many years working white-collar crime. So some people don't know that, but I worked 3 years working white-collar crime. So when I went to the behavioral analysis unit, while the majority of my work was violent crime, we did do cases on public corruption. So I do have a white-collar background, and I do really enjoy cases of white-collar fraud and con man cases.
All right. So as it relates to, we're not talking about serial killers here. We're talking about somebody who's being accused of long-term harassment. And as an FBI profiler, how do you develop a behavioral pattern for somebody like that?
It is kind of interesting because when we looked at white-collar offenders versus serial killers, while they're not committing violent crime and they're not killing anybody, but there were some similar characteristics between the offenders, whether it's being manipulative, controlling, greedy, things like that. Their own needs come first before anybody else's. They don't have consideration for others. They lack responsibility. And when I say that, I mean, when they make a promise, they don't care or not if they keep it. Most of us feel bad if we break a promise. These offenders don't care. And so you see some characteristics that are similar between some high-level white-collar offenders or white-collar offenders in general or con men and serial killers, believe it or not.
I can totally see that.
Yeah, they're expressing things a little different. While we think their crimes are very different, some of their personality traits and characteristics are very similar.
I asked Julia if white-collar criminals have the potential to turn violent if they're cornered or feel like they have no way out.
I would say that not every white-collar criminal would commit murder or some other violent crime to hide what they're doing, but I wouldn't put it past them. I don't think you can say just because you're committing white-collar crime, you would never be violent. I mean, there's a lot at stake for some people, their reputation, financial. They're risking going to prison for life, and they may become very desperate, and they may end up committing a violent crime in order to protect themselves. So again, coming back to their own needs come before anybody else's. And if somebody's going to expose them and they're going to get exposed for what they're doing and they're going to lose everything, they could very well commit a violent crime. I wouldn't say that's across the board, but I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah, it's really hard to say things, in absolutes, right? But the potential is there. And as a profiler, what do you think about LaDonna Humphrey and her psychological and behavioral characteristics? I'm just curious about your impression.
Having not looked at the evidence myself, and I don't know her, and a lot of times we'll do assessments of people, we never meet them. But hearing the stories, if these are true, I would...
Right. Based on everything I've presented, I could be completely making this up as far as you know.
I don't think you're making it up.
Right.
But in terms of what you've presented up to this point, you're looking at, okay, what are motivations? And it's quite possible that a person engaging in this type of behavior likely harbors significant anger towards others, desire for control and power. I see that not only in some of what you've presented, but you see that in other similar types of cases where somebody is harassing others or sending anonymous emails or making anonymous complaints about people. Motivations potentially in this case could be a combination. I don't think it's just one thing. I think there's an element of vengeance, an element of thrill-seeking, desire for fame and influence in certain communities, or wanting to be perceived a certain way. So those are some motivations that I would see when I'm, listening to some of what's been alleged. Many of these actions, some of them seem impulsive, but generally I think some of them come across as calculated and premeditated. For example, the fetish master. I don't think that's impulsive. I think that was to potentially make them part of the story. So that is more of a long-term planned out thing. This is what I want to accomplish from this versus a spur of the moment reactionary, I'm mad, I'm going to send this anonymous email. So I think you have a combination of that potentially going on.
I guess you're right. There's not one motive. There could be a lot of motives. But when I spoke with her sister, Margot, she said, no, I think she's doing this for the fun of it. But I do think that there are other, and excuse the thunder. Do you
hear that? I did hear that.
It's very moody, I think we got to keep it. We got to keep it. Yeah. It adds
that
ambiance.
Might be a sign.
Yeah,
we should stop here.
In my conversation with Alicia, she mentioned that, in hindsight, this whole fetish master thing, when Alicia and LaDonna were working together, sometimes, Alicia wasn't as attentive to her as she would have liked, I guess. And when the attention dried up, all of a sudden she would receive a message from Fetish Master. It was almost a way to provoke Alicia into talking with her again. This need for control. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, that's quite possible. Keep the person close. You're scaring them. They have a reason to reach out to you. And also it's a way of creating a need in them, in that other person, so that they need you to help fix this. And you have a common enemy and you're in this together. There's a lot of things. And you see this too when we go back to serial killers. And I'm not calling or suggesting anyone's a serial killer, but
right.
In a lot of the crimes that we look at, including white collar crimes, these people are very controlling. They're controlling in almost all aspects of their life, and they have that need to control. And that stems from a feeling of a lack of control.
We talked about the motives, but there's also this component of the consistency in behavior. LaDonna says, oh, this is just a organized attack on me. These people, because I keep saying that they have nothing in common. She's like, no, they have somebody in common. It's a very directed attack. But if you look at the accusations from all the people who are saying that they are victims of her, there's this consistency in behavior. And, how significant is that, the consistency over time with someone like LaDonna, and who has been accused by multiple individuals from different contexts, right?
Right. And I think that is very significant. When I would take in a complaint at the FBI or multiple complaints, if you have complaints that are coming from people that don't even know each other, but they're similar and they're about a similar person or a business or something like that, I'm not going to say you give any other complaints less credibility, but certainly those you give a lot of credibility to because they don't know each other. They haven't had a chance to get their story straight.
In order for a conspiracy like this to take place, it would require the alleged victims to have this coordinated effort to bring LaDonna Humphrey down. But the problem is that most of these people didn't even know each other. I'll give you an example. And by the way, what I'm about to present to you is an even bigger smoking gun than the Fetish Master screenshots, okay? LaDonna, try to explain this. Since this podcast series started, we've been collecting screenshots of every spam message sent to the victims. Most, if not all, of these messages were sent from anonymous and untraceable phone numbers. And as we catalog these phone numbers, we are starting to get matches. Check this out. One spam message sent to Alicia Lockhart on May 9th, 2023 contained several images of pimples being popped. It read, "I'm getting squeezed so hard and juiced dry. Dripping soaked love muffins." The very next night, an Oasis of Northwest Arkansas manager gets a text message from the same number that reads, quote, "I found this photo of you from when I was at Oasis," unquote. Alicia and the manager had never met. They didn't even know each other. The only common denominator there is LaDonna Humphrey. LaDonna with a capital D. And again, what's up with the muffins, huh? Patty Rush used to get messages from the Muffin Man, remember that? None of these people knew each other. Then, on September 19th, 2022, the same Oasis manager gets a message that says, quote, "I need to report to you that one of the women at Oasis has been fingering down to the bone when the house be sleeping. I boned her in the garage too," unquote. That same number messaged Alicia another vulgar message. Another set of messages sent to 3 different people, one of which was Jessica Brown, the Death Fetish forum owner. The text included the exact same phrase, quote, "I was human trafficked." Trafficked was misspelled the same way. Then, in another set of messages, a picture of a woman was sent to both Alicia and that Oasis manager, the same woman. Again, the only common denominator, LaDonna Humphrey. There were 7 text matches in total. All of them were equally disgusting. But let's get back to my interview with Julia Cowley.
So, as an FBI profiler, I think part of your job is also victimology, right? And trying to study the victims in this case as it relates to LaDonna Humphrey and the people who are making accusations against her. What do these victims have in common is probably a better question.
Well, without knowing everything about every victim in this case, it's hard to say what they might all have in common. But from what I can tell, at least from what you've reported or they've reported on your show to you, is that they had some contact with her. I'm not aware if there's been any allegations of somebody who just started getting harassed and they didn't even have a
out of the blue
prior relationship. So that's what I see as the commonality. Just they know her, had some sort of working relationship.
In your experience, and even when you've probably spoken to some, most people would consider the most horrible human beings to have ever walked this earth, right? Have you seen actual change happen with some of the people that you've investigated, like in terms of behavior, or
no?
Is this kind of set?
I don't really see change, not anything significant. They may curtail their activities in order to benefit themselves. They realize this isn't working for me, I better stop. But do they ever really change? Not in my opinion. And usually they just figure out a different way to do it. And the only way you prevent them from continuing is to take away their freedom, take away their access to things that they would be using to commit their crimes, things like that. But they don't really change. And while they will admit sometimes to some things, they tend not to admit to everything. And oftentimes when they're forced to admit to something, especially in a case of fraud, they have an overwhelming amount of evidence and they're kind of forced to, okay, I have to accept responsibility. And then a lot of times you'll see they recant. I didn't confess. I have seen that.
Well, everybody's sorry when they're caught, right? And then,
yeah. In terms of real change in these types of offenders, and I just mean generally, they don't really ever change.
By the way, Julia Cowley hosts a podcast called The Consult. Look it up and subscribe and thank me later. I'll have a link in the show notes. When we come back from the break, we are going to talk about what the future holds for LaDonna Humphrey.
Hey, Prime members, are you tired of ads interfering with your favorite podcasts? Good news! With Amazon Music, you have access to the largest catalog of ad-free top podcasts included with your Prime membership. To start listening, download the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free podcasts. That's amazon.com/ad-free podcasts to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
So I had to drive out to this town. It's out past my house. It's called Gentry because that's where this Little Debbie factory is, you know, where they make all those little donuts and snack cakes and whatnot. And they had donated thousands and thousands of Little Debbie snack cakes and donuts that are in these cases. So I've been loading that shit in Danny's truck for the past 15 minutes. And I'm just like, my God, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to do true crime. I don't want to load snack cakes in the back of my truck.
By now, you are aware that LaDonna Humphrey has solicited donations from companies despite the fact that her nonprofit was not tax exempt for 8 years. According to Alicia Lockhart, LaDonna's pantry was stocked up with Little Debbie cakes. We spent several episodes dishing out evidence after evidence of LaDonna asking for money and donations. I questioned the Arkansas Secretary of State, the Attorney General's office, and even the Small Business Association about this. None of these agencies seemed to give a flying Swiss roll about LaDonna Humphrey. The Little Debbie fiasco is not the most egregious evidence we've dug up, but who knows, right? For all we know, Little Debbie didn't care who they donated to, but it's just one more thing that LaDonna's accusers say that she's gotten away with. Remember, I'm only telling you the stories of the people who have come forward. There are potential victims out there who don't even want to get involved. I'm talking about family members who have shared their harassing messages, but are just too afraid to come forward and fear that the harassment could start all over again. I didn't even tell you about LaDonna's involvement with the Morgan Nick Foundation. Morgan Nick was a 6-year-old girl who was abducted from a ballpark and never was seen again. The victim's mother has accused LaDonna of stealing money from her daughter's foundation, a foundation LaDonna Humphrey managed. Unfortunately, I can't corroborate the claims because Morgan Nick's mother just doesn't want to get involved. Then there are the allegations of financial mismanagement at her nonprofit Oasis of Northwest Arkansas, raising money for a resident's baby shower or a tornado relief fund, and then being accused of pocketing the money. The list goes on and on and on. It might seem like LaDonna is getting away with all this, but is she? In 2018, LaDonna Humphrey was fired from Absolute Pediatrics for stealing business information, running background checks on employees, and spreading false claims about the company. She claims that she was fired for being a whistleblower. Anthony Christopher, the owner of Absolute Pediatrics, sued LaDonna, and they duked it out in court. Ultimately, the court ruled against LaDonna, saying that she had destroyed evidence, among other violations, and she was found in contempt of court. That's when LaDonna served the 10 days in jail. The court has also ordered her to pay $3.5 million in damages. Here's a voice memo that LaDonna sent Alicia during the trial.
Anyway, of course I'm nervous. I don't know how I feel. I don't think I can win today, which means he'll start the collection, but I would definitely love that there would be some sort of miracle or that the judge would hear my argument. And I've got court on Friday, and I'm super nervous about that because if I lose, he starts collecting, which means when you're here, they'll probably send the sheriff out to come take some of my stuff for the collection. So that'll be fun. But I'm trying to stay, positive and, fight the good fight.
LaDonna tried to appeal the decision to reduce the amount she owed, but while all of this was going on, she also filed for bankruptcy. A trustee was assigned to handle her assets during the bankruptcy, and one of those assets was her right to appeal the judgment. Instead of letting Humphrey continue with her appeal, the trustee decided to sell her appeal rights to Anthony Christopher for $12,500. The trustee only sold the rights to the appeal because LaDonna listed them as an asset in her bankruptcy. This would allow Christopher to essentially stop her from appealing the decision, keeping the $3.5 million judgment in place. An appeals court sided with LaDonna and agreed that selling her rights to the appeal for $12,500 while leaving her with a $3.5 million non-dischargeable debt should not be approved. So they reversed the bankruptcy court's decision. I know, that was a lot and it might have been a little confusing, But the bottom line is that LaDonna Humphrey is currently appealing that $3.5 million judgment.
I want to clarify one other thing because, again, part of this smoke and mirrors, LaDonna talks about, oh, she's got this appeal and she's going to win. I just want to set the record straight when I say that this appeal that LaDonna is filing is not appealing the verdict of the case. This is LaDonna appealing that she feels her rights were taken from her by having the damages hearing heard in front of a jury of her peers. So let's say everything goes well in LaDonna land and she wins this appeal at the Arkansas State Court of Appeals. The only thing that's going to come from this is that LaDonna and myself will be back in front of Judge Duncan with a jury of our peers that will re-listen to all of the horrendous things LaDonna did after the guilty verdict is final. And they will then award a new damages amount. So the thing is LaDonna's throwing the dice. These people may look at her and say, I cannot believe what you've done. And guess what? Instead of $3.57 million, you're going to pay, I don't know, $6, $8, $10 million. I think it's just important that the listeners know that this appeal is not to appeal the verdict. This is to get her a damages hearing in front of a jury of her peers and nothing more.
But in the meantime, LaDonna and her pal, David McClam, have published a podcast claiming that Anthony Christopher paid off the judge who tried the case. LaDonna's evidence? A redacted affidavit from a person who worked for Anthony. Who is this person? The affidavit was never filed with the courts, so we can't request it. And we don't even know who said this and if it's even true. Honestly, it's pretty laughable at face value. I wonder how Judge Duncan will react to this absurd accusation that she was paid off. And what would the jury think when they're trying to determine LaDonna Humphrey's new damages amount? As we think about this series coming to a conclusion, right? What are your thoughts after all of this? I mean, there's been over 15 episodes, a lot of commotion on social media, on Reddit. People have been writing letters to different places. Do you feel like we have reason to be hopeful, or do you feel disappointed? Like, what are your thoughts now as this series wraps up?
Well, I can tell you that I feel very thankful. For many years, I lived with a dark cloud over me. For years, I was fighting this silent battle against this woman who was terrorizing my life, not realizing that there were so many other victims there. I can tell you, Javier, I'm really thankful for what you've done. And I'm really thankful for the awareness. And while I don't want to say too much right now, I can tell you that there are things in motion, and there are things that she's going to have to answer very hard questions to. And hopefully, I think people will see exactly the situation for what it is. And I think that the wheels of justice are sometimes slow turning, but the response of karma is very powerful. And I think that she will be held accountable. And I think she may feel like she can go right back out on the attack after this. But again, I think that that's going to be another downfall for LaDonna. I think that her best bet is to move on with her life. Let these victims move on with their lives. You said early on, the best and the biggest thing she could have done was acknowledge what she's done to these people, apologize, and move on. And so I'm hopeful, but unfortunately, we know how that ends.
And early on when I was working on this, I felt like people didn't really understand how, when we call this series Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, it's not just a clever title playing off of a name of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. It's not just a cute little title. It really encapsulates how people feel. And I was worried that the audience wouldn't understand how genuinely afraid people are of this woman. But I think people get it now because they are seeing it in real time. They're like watching it unfold in real time. This woman is not laying low, weathering the storm. She is fighting back really hard, fighting back against me, fighting back against everyone who has spoken out about her. And people are genuinely afraid of her. But I feel like there was a tectonic shift happening where people felt emboldened to speak out because it had that ripple effect, right? Like 4 or 5 people spoke out initially, and then people felt empowered, right?
Absolutely. And I think that that's a testament of these victims uniting and saying, look, not only were we victims, but we're now survivors, and we are not going to allow you to steal any more of our life or our happiness or our mental space. And I'll tell you, it took me years to get there. But I'll tell you, I mean, at the end of the day, LaDonna will be held accountable. And I think that what's going to happen beyond this moment and how brazen she wants to get and how bold she wants to be in her attacks are only going to further her guilt when it comes to a court of law.
I want people to be hopeful and realize that even though a lot of people tell me like, oh, well, this story won't have a satisfying ending. And that always irritates me because these aren't stories. These are people's lives. And some of the information I'm presenting is presented in an entertaining way, but I feel like this story took a turn, right? At some point, it went from being like entertaining, like hearing about all these awful things that happened. And then it took this like really serious turn as to like, oh, wow, I've been listening to this. And now I am witnessing real time, possibly human trafficking of women at the sober living facility. And I cannot just be this passive listener. I have to take action, right?
You know, I think that these stories are, you know, had they not been so well documented with court documents or text messages or audio voices or other things, you know, it would almost be unbelievable because the things that this woman and the extent that she has gone to ruin these people are high and they're heavy. And so I think, you know, there became a point in this where people were outraged. You know, you have all of these people that have been victimized all these years. But when people started to really listen in on what these poor women at Oasis were going through, I think that's where we really saw the shift. You know, the sad part, Javier, is the only option for these women is prison again. And their one barrier between them, the free world, and prison is LaDonna Humphrey. And that's a scary way to live life. And I think that is what your listeners heard.
I want to end with something very hopeful because, you know, when people say you don't have a satisfying ending, satisfying, what's satisfying, right? Like getting her locked up, is that what's satisfying? I don't know. You know, like I don't even know if that's the answer, but we have made some progress throughout this podcast. And let's list out some of the victories, right? First thing is first is that we got Fort Smith Police Department to conduct an internal investigation to see what was going on and who was giving her access, right?
Absolutely. You know, it's very clear that there were crimes committed where Fort Smith police were concerned in the Melissa Witt case file. You know, they were provided evidence to show that LaDonna stole evidence from the case file. You know, that's a victory because guess what? Whether she's charged or not, she will never have access to the Melissa Witt case file again. And for that, I'm thankful.
Another win was that we made the court system aware of the situation. Now, it's not a complete win because it doesn't seem like Judge Smith actually cared about some of the accusations that were being put forward. But there's a lot of awareness right now in the drug court system and in the nonprofit space about what's going on in Oasis, right? And just that visibility alone, I would consider a win, right?
You know, I think LaDonna knows that she will never be able to garner another career outside of Oasis because the word is out in Northwest Arkansas about her. This is a woman that was said to every morning fill her big gulp with Diet Coke, sit on her couch, and Google her name to see what's online. Well, guess what? If you Google LaDonna Humphrey now, none of it is good towards her. Nothing is complimentary other than her own words about herself on her website. And so I think we have built awareness, at least in Northwest Arkansas, where these people know that this is not somebody you want to associate or affiliate with.
But most importantly, as it relates to Oasis, I think the message is out there within the community in Northwest Arkansas that you might want to think twice before you donate a large amount of money to Oasis because you might not know where it's going.
Well, absolutely. You not only do you not know where it's going, but geez, there were at least 8 years where you're writing that off on your taxes when it's not tax deductible. At some point, the IRS can come knocking back to these donors, requiring them to amend their taxes. And guess what? They're going to owe Uncle Sam a pretty penny.
Another win in my book, I think, is making the Secretary of State's office in Arkansas aware of the situation. And it took a podcast to make them fill out their paperwork so that they could become compliant with the IRS and with the state. So, yeah, that's sad that it took 8 years for a podcast to come around for them to become a tax-exempt organization, but it happened, right? So that's kind of a win.
Absolutely. I think it's a win.
Another win is we did a little bit of a back and forth with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's office, but I kind of believe that the Attorney General's office got the message, don't you think? I mean, a lot of people, a lot of listeners and people on Reddit sent out letters. Do you think that was impactful?
Absolutely. And I know that there is an active investigation, not only into the dealings of LaDonna Humphrey, but the dealings that she has had with Oasis of Northwest Arkansas. So, again, I mean, that takes quite a while to work through that process. But I think as that comes forward, I think that, again, she's going to have to answer for those things that she's done where the AG is concerned.
And there was also a possible criminal investigation happening locally looking into LaDonna and some of the harassments, right?
I definitely know that there is an active investigation into LaDonna's harassment. And again, the subpoena power is very beautiful. And I think that when that comes back, we're going to find that all of these heinous, disgusting, harassing messages that all of these people have received over the years are going to point back to LaDonna's device. So that's not something that she can easily deny or right away.
And there's also been a real structural change within Oasis of Northwest Arkansas, right? We know for a fact that Haley, one of her right-hand man in the sober living facility, has resigned probably because of the podcast.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of eyes and a lot of pressure to do the right thing. And thankfully, Haley's young. She's a new graduate from the University of Arkansas. She has her whole life ahead of her. She made the right decision to walk away and get out now.
So, I mean, when you look at it that way, do you feel like that there has been a lot of progress made?
Absolutely. I believe that there have been monumental amount of progress that have been made in helping to not only put a stop to LaDonna, but to show the world the LaDonna Humphrey that all of these victims know to be true.
Just the other day, someone posted on Reddit about a woman in the Pacific Northwest who was indicted by a grand jury and charged with stealing thousands of dollars from an addiction center she runs. Sound familiar? Sounds a lot like Oasis, huh? Dawn Holland was charged with 9 counts of first-degree aggravated theft and 1 count of first-degree theft. So don't tell me that a creative prosecutor in Northwest Arkansas can't figure out a way to hold a person like LaDonna Humphrey accountable. It's clearly possible to charge people for these types of crimes. This podcast has gotten a lot of attention in LaDonna's neck of the woods. I met with a group of nonprofit leaders who are appalled by this behavior and have each taken action to bring this matter in front of influential people in the area. There's nowhere to hide, but all this could have been avoided if she didn't agree to come on my show, right? It was an ambush, she says. Wrong. This issue was reaching a boiling point. And if it wasn't my podcast, some other journalist was going to cover this story. And I hope more people will keep this story alive. I have no ownership over this story, so please take the baton and run with it. My audience, although mighty, is still rather small. Someone on Reddit pointed out that I invited LaDonna Humphrey on my show, and she was genuinely excited. She thought that the only thing we were going to talk about was her successful true crime career and the Missy Witt case.
I'm excited to meet you. I am a big fan of your work. So yeah,
Oh, thank you.
I'm very excited about this.
It never dawned on her that the guy who produces a show called The Criminal Conduct and another show called Pretend could possibly want to talk about her documented history of harassment? Is she that naive? I don't know. Since our interview, LaDonna Humphrey has had every opportunity to make her case. She had a chance on my show. Heck, she has multiple podcasts herself. She has a blog. She frequently sends out press releases. And even her own sock puppet account on the LaDonna Humphrey Talks subreddit could have made the case for her, but yet she has failed to explain away these accusations. Her best defense was casting doubt on her accusers. When given the chance to explain herself, all she does is redirect, mislead, and gaslight her enemies. When confronted about the Fetish Master account, she offered up all kinds of explanations, except the most obvious one, that it was her. When asked to turn over her nonprofit tax information, she refuses. She says I'm harassing her. She had a chance to clear things up on her reaction podcast, We Are Not Afraid. Every episode promises to present proof, yet she has successfully dodged the most damning of accusations. LaDonna has even leveraged a local tabloid blog to smear her opponents, including myself. If you are truly innocent, then why don't you address each accusation one by one? But enough of this tit for tat. I'm going to let LaDonna Humphrey have the last word.
This is my career. This is my dream right now. And not just right now, but you know what I mean. This has been my dream, and this is what I'm working for because I want a career in true crime. I've wanted it for as long as I can remember. And I'm going to do whatever it takes in terms of hard work to get there.
All right, guys, that is a wrap. That was season 18, Who's Afraid of LaDonna Humphrey, trademark. I know I'm tired of her shenanigans, and I bet some of you are too. So I'm going to move on to other stories. I have a pile-up of fascinating cases that I want to share with you. But we know the story is not over, and there are plenty of LaDonna Humphrey adjacent stories that we left on the cutting room floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue this series on Patreon and Pretend Plus on Apple Podcasts. I have a handful of bonus episodes and 2 full LaDonna-related episodes already in the works. So if you're interested, I hope you consider joining Patreon or Pretend Plus. Remember, if you are considering Patreon, join through your web browser on your computer and not through your iOS device. Apple is now tacking on a 30% fee for when you sign up through the App Store. If you're already a Patreon supporter, don't worry, this does not affect you. All right, so what's next, huh? I got a lot of great stories, but I think you're gonna like this one. Remember the Stalker series, Tanya and Rick Fernandez? Well, guess what? They are back, and we are going to revisit the Stalker case. Oh yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Today's show was written by me, Javier Leiva. It was edited by the talented Punit Shenoy with the Podcast Pundits. Our theme music was composed by Joel Basile with thechicken.net. That's it for today's show. I'll see you on the other side.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive.
Are you driving your car or doing the laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too.
Having these 2 policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average.
Quote a home and car bundle today at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
Creative Babble.